Have you ever been accused of something you genuinely didn't do, yet the certainty in the other person's voice was so strong that you began to question yourself? Not a loud confrontation, not an explosive argument, just a repeated remark, a look that felt conclusive, a statement delivered as if the truth had already been settled, and you stood there, unsure whether you were being misunderstood or whether there was something you had failed to see within yourself. Projection does not begin with a desire to hurt another person. It begins with an inability to tolerate oneself. Human beings struggle to hold traits that clash with the image the ego is trying to protect: selfishness, envy, deceit, weakness. When such qualities surface, the mind does not seek understanding, it seeks removal, outward, away from the self, outside the boundary of who I believe I am. The fastest way to do this is to recognize the trait in someone else. Accusation becomes a defense mechanism, not to attack, but to soothe inner conflict. If that flaw belongs to them, then the self remains intact. Projection allows the ego to preserve a sense of purity without confronting contradiction. The hardest truth to accept is this: projection does not require fabrication. It often attaches itself to something real, a vague reaction, an ambiguous moment, a behavior that can be interpreted in more than one way. That is enough. The accusation settles over it like a final explanation. And once that explanation exists, curiosity shuts down. The person being projected onto is pulled into a role they did not choose. They begin to defend, to explain, to prove. Meanwhile, the one projecting gains temporary relief from looking at their own shadow. Reality is inverted, tension is transferred, and the relationship becomes a space where responsibility is consistently misplaced. Projection reveals something unsettling about the human psyche. We do not fear being wrong as much as we fear seeing ourselves clearly. We will accept a distorted story if it allows the ego to remain comfortable. And what makes this mechanism dangerous is not the accusation itself, but the certainty that accompanies it. When someone is overly convinced of another person's guilt, it may say very little about the accused. It may simply indicate that something within the accuser remains unacknowledged. When projection repeats, it does more than distort perception. It restructures relationships. The one receiving the projection slowly enters a defensive state. Words become calculated. Reactions are filtered, not to understand themselves, but to avoid being assigned another hidden fault. Doubt no longer comes from outside. It is internalized. A question begins to circulate quietly. What if this is actually true? Even when before that moment the thought had never existed. At the same time, the one projecting consolidates a moral position. They become the one who sees clearly, the one who speaks truth, the one who names the problem. No evidence is required. No mutual inquiry is necessary. Only enough certainty to silence resistance. Over time, an asymmetry forms. One side explains, the other concludes. No one wins, but one person avoids looking directly at the part of themselves they refuse to face. Projection exposes an uncomfortable truth. Humans do not defend against evil, they defend against internal contradiction. We struggle to hold the idea that we can be decent and still carry traits we openly despise. Rather than holding both at once, we split them apart. One part is preserved as identity, the other is expelled, assigned to someone else. This is not always conscious deceit. It is a psychological survival strategy, a way to prevent the ego from collapsing under self-recognition. But the cost is fragmentation of truth. And when truth fragments, relationships stop being places of encounter and become arenas of quiet conflict. Notice the moments when you feel unusually certain about another person's flaws. No need to argue, no need to correct, Just observe what that certainty might be protecting inside you. If this reflection touches something unresolved in your own experience, share your perspective, not to arrive at conclusions, but to continue the examination. And if you want to keep exploring the subtle psychological mechanisms that shape behavior, power, and distance within human relationships, follow the channel.